When you bring on a guest, it's not all the awards and the TED Talks and the books that they've written. It's the value they're going to provide that day to your audience.
Your podcast should be your most powerful business development tool, a trust and authority builder, and your content creation engine. Let's help your podcast help your business with the Story Trust Media Podcast. Here's your host, John Gehring.
She brought on great guests to interview. She talked about great topics. Her audience loved the content. But the one thing that was holding her back, she was flattering her guests too much. I'm John Gehring. This is the Story Trust Media Podcast. And I once worked with a client who was really strong in the podcasting game. She had it all right. The fancy microphone, the really expensive camera. She had the whole lighting set up. She had the couches, for crying out loud. The famous couch over here, couch over there, multiple camera angles, just highly produced podcast, wonderful. She would bring on guests. And the mistake that she would make, she would flatter the heck out of them. And you're saying, John, what's wrong with that? You want to make your guests feel comfortable, right? This host that I worked with, and I thank her for letting me call her out here because I did get her permission, and she's a great lady and she's got an amazing podcast. Okay, so I'm just going to put that out there that I worked with her. I'm not trying to talk bad about her, but this is a real thing that we worked on. She was flattering them just way too much. And yes, there's a balance because you want to make sure that your guests are comfortable. You want to establish your guests as an authority that your audience can trust because that's a reflection of you as a podcast host, right? But when it gets to the point where you're focused more on the accolades that they bring than the value that they can deliver, now you've crossed the line. So this is why you got to be careful not to flatter your guests too much, okay? How often do we hear a podcast host come on and say, I got Mary Jane on today, and Mary Jane has written 16 books, and she's done 17 TED Talks, and she's just an amazing all-around woman, and I'm just so delighted and honored to have her on today, and oh, I know she's going to be... Stop. What about that actually is a promise of value that she's going to deliver to help the audience solve a problem that they have? None of that is. So focus on value over accolades. Mary Jane's done 17 TED Talks. Great. About what? How are Mary Jane's TED Talks going to help me? Great example would be a podcast I recently listened to on overcoming burnout. Really important topic, right? Burnout is such a big deal in our society today. And if you haven't experienced it, you're probably not an entrepreneur. And let's face it, you're probably not a podcaster either, right? But the power of overcoming burnout, this episode was so valuable because what the host so masterfully did with her guest was she flattered her while weaving in the value that she was going to bring. For example, this guest had done a TED Talk. But in introducing the guest, the host didn't focus so much on the number of TED Talks, number of books, number of awards that she's won, what prestigious university she went to. But she weaved it in a way that still promised the value that the guest was going to deliver. So instead of, she's a TEDx speaker, the host said, this guest's TED Talk on overcoming burnout has helped thousands of people overcome burnout in their own lives, and she's here to do the same for you, or to help you do the same, using her 5 techniques outlined in her best-selling book. See, these are the ways that you can weave the value that you're promising your guest to provide into an introduction that also flatters them. She's got a best-selling book. That's great. You don't want to leave that out. I'm not suggesting that. But this podcaster that I worked with, her mistake was just flattering for the sake of flattering. And she mistakenly thought, and this is intuitive, right? So this makes sense. You might be thinking this too right now. She mistakenly thought, if I just flatter the heck out of her and I just tell the audience about all of the great awards that she's won and the prestigious university that she's went to, the audience is going to just automatically have trust, right? Because it's all about building trust. We're trying to establish that connection between the guest and the audience right away. And the audience is that their trust is going to be built so high that they're going to want to tune into the whole episode. The problem with that is that's not actually what builds trust, especially in a day and age where there's awards for everything, right? I'm not trying to diminish the value of many of these awards, but guess what? I know so many award winning producers, award winning authors, award winning podcasters. And it's a good thing, but that in and of itself does not build trust. What builds trust is the way that you make someone else feel, the value that you provide to them. Think of the last time you had a service provided to you. Maybe you had a plumber come to your house and the plumber, I don't know, broke your pipes, made things worse. But the plumber was an award winning plumber. You saw the ad for the plumber on all their 5-star reviews. The plumber was featured in Plumbing Magazine Today. That's not what builds trust. It's your personal experience with that plumber that builds trust. So why isn't it the same in podcasting? Guess what? It is. When you bring on a guest, it's not all the awards and the TED Talks and the books that they've written. It's the value they're going to provide that day to your audience. More specifically, the problem they're going to help your audience solve. And remember, you brought them on for that specific reason. Not just to highlight all their great accomplishments, although you can do that in a way that's a win-win for everyone. You can do that in a way that helps promote their book, because their book is just an extension of all the great knowledge they've given on this podcast episode. So you cannot do all that, but make sure to lead with value, not accolades. And when you do that, your podcast guest builds trust with your audience, which makes for a better podcast episode. And ultimately, that trickles down to you. You build trust with your audience, because what that tells your audience is that this host really cares about my best interests. They really care about helping me solve a problem, whether that's with solo episodes or whether that's with guests that they bring on to help me solve problems. And when you do that, your podcast grows, you build trust and true relationships with your audience, and the results follow.
Thanks for checking out the Story Trust Media podcast. Learn more about what Story Trust Media can do for your business and book a free consultation at storytrust.media.